Well, IndiGo has been India's largest airline for a while now, and their latest results, their annual results suggest that the growth of the airline remains extremely positive. They command a market share of 63%. They have a fleet of a whopping 434 aircraft, and that's much less than what they'd like to be, and they're inducting aircraft at a record pace. We've got a wonderful guest with us, the CEO of IndiGo, Pieter Elbers. Thanks very much for being with us. It's great to see IndiGo prosper in the way that you are at this stage. Aviation in India is booming. We've spoken about that in the past, but there's been concern about what we've seen in the last, let's say, 1 month or so after the Pahalgam terror attacks. It is something which hit the aviation sector in terms of bookings and cancellations. Do you believe the situation is now stabilizing?
Well, good evening, and thank you for having me. We've seen actually a very strong year last year with a different performance over the different quarters, but overall a very strong performance last year and especially last quarter. That performance had continued in the month of April, and the numbers for April were released yesterday by the DGCA. Obviously, the month of May has been impacted by the situation in the north of the country, and with the return now of the opening of all the stations, basically IndiGo has reinstated all its flights. So taking a step back and looking to the overall demand and the market and the opportunities for the market, actually we have seen that the cancellations basically came to a halt and that people start to book again. And with that, we have an optimistic view on the return of travelers pretty soon, actually.
Is there any rough estimate of how many cancellations of flights were taking place, let's say, for the month of May as a result of the tensions?
Yeah, let me put it in perspective. If you see what happened, there were 32 airports closed. IndiGo was operating out of 11 of these 32 airports. So we had 11 airports closed, and we had a total of 170 flights a day closed. IndiGo operates a little short of 2,300 flights on a daily basis. So 170 out of 2,300 were cancelled, and that had a duration of 8 days. So if you take the entire month of May, the cancellations were at 8 days only, and on those 8 days, there was 170 flights out of a total of 2,300. So that puts it into perspective, and you come to a very low single-digit number in terms of flights cancellations as percentage of the overall flights in the entire month.
Mr. Elbers, the other concern, of course, is that flights are now having to get much longer because Pakistani airspace is closed. This is for your international operations, flights to the Middle East, for example. And, given the volatility of the situation between India and Pakistan, and that's something that can continue into the future, how much of a concern is it? And a related question, at what stage will you pass on these costs to passengers? Because obviously it's going to be much more expensive to operate longer flights for you.
Yeah, what we have been doing, and also there, let me put it in perspective. After the Pakistani airspace closure, IndiGo decided to suspend, or actually we had to suspend flights into Tashkent and Almaty because circumflying Pakistani airspace made these flights too long. So out of a total of 131 destinations, 41 international, we needed to suspend 2. Then for the remaining flights, and those flights indeed from the northern part of India into the Middle East, we had a total of 19 routes and a total of 35 flights being affected by longer flying times up to 20 to 30 minutes. So if you look at these numbers, again, putting it in perspective of the total situation, these are actually relatively limited numbers for IndiGo. Of course, we would be better off if the airspace was not closed, and of course, we would be better off if we did not have to deal with that reality. But it's a reality we deal with. And what we are doing now, we're kind of reviewing our network, and we may reallocate some of that capacity more to the southern part. I think there the opportunity for India and IndiGo really is, given the size of the country and the different hubs with their different geographical scopes, we have the opportunity to temporarily, if needed, reallocate some of that capacity to other places.
The A321 XLR is an aircraft that IndiGo is really banking on. But again, the entire issue of range, as I understand it, might come into play if airspace over Pakistan is closed. So, for example, if I was looking to fly from Delhi to a destination in Europe, which might well be the case with the aircraft you're acquiring non-stop, would that not be a problem for me if Pakistani airspace is closed?
Yeah. Well, firstly, we get the XLR towards the end of this calendar year. And, that's still far away from where we are today. And a lot can happen in terms of airspace between today and that point in time. So I say that's one. Two, and again here, we have the opportunity to put these planes in different parts of the country as well. And if we fly from Delhi to, for example, Denpasar on Bali, there's no Pakistan airspace on that route. So the opportunity of flying to different geographies, to fly to different parts of the world, to have different routes being operated, we have the opportunity to reallocate some of that aircraft, if needed, still by the time it's December or even early 26, we have the opportunity to fly them on other routes to avoid any of these challenges.
The other concern which has arisen post-Pahalgam is Turkey. You have, a tie-up with Turkish Airlines. You fly some of the most, in fact, the world's most intense 777 operations in terms of the number of seats which they have. And that is, Turkey and Istanbul is a gateway for your passengers to go to many other parts of the world. But there's a certain sentiment over here. We've seen what's happened to the company Celebi. And I know that there is pressure on IndiGo as well. How are you dealing with it? And how do you respond to those who say that, look, IndiGo needs to cut down its operations through Turkey?
Well, there's I would say, different layers in this discussion. The first layer is the operations between countries when it comes to air travel are being governed by what is called an air service agreement. And the air service agreement defines what is the number of flights and who to operate and so on and so forth. So that is the basic operating principle also for IndiGo. Within that framework of the air service agreement, IndiGo is operating fully compliant with the regulations, the frameworks, the opportunities and the restrictions possibly which such provides. I think certainly that's important. We do have thousands of customers being booked on those flights, either from India to other parts of the world connecting over Istanbul, or from other parts of the world connecting over in Istanbul back to India. And we want to continue to serve those customers. In the overall scheme of things, and you mentioned at the introduction, IndiGo is having over 400 planes. These are 2 aircraft out of the 400. So that puts it a bit in perspective. What is the overall quantity? But our viewpoint is we operate within the guidance of whatever is in the air service agreement, compliant with the government regulations. If they change, we'll adjust accordingly to make sure that we're compliant. And for now, we continue to serve our customers.
So how would you respond to anybody who says or asks whether you are under pressure to curb services through Turkey?
I don't think IndiGo is under pressure to cut services to Turkey. Again, if the government were to change its set of rules, of course we comply with that. But if any pressure, we feel the need to make sure that we fulfill the obligations we have to all the customers who put their trust in us, who made their booking with us, who have their travel plans with us, in the same way as we quickly reinstated all our flights to the northern part of India when they reopened. In the same way, we want to serve our customers which are booked on these flights.
Is there any possibility that IndiGo would consider of a new hub, perhaps outside, if there are problems which continue with Turkey?
Of course, as an airline, we always look for, if circumstances change or if operational elements are changing, we'll adjust accordingly in the same way as we have adjusted our network after the Pakistan airspace closure, in the same way we adjusted our network due to other weather-related events. So we'll always make sure that we look for what fallback opportunities or what fallback positions are there. But But until that becomes the case, we continue to operate in the way we operate today.
Now, Mr. Elbers, when we spoke about, I think, 2 or a little bit more years back, that was, I think, our first interview, I kept asking you and repeatedly, are you going to be going international? Are you going to be flying long-haul aircraft? And you gave me a neither here nor there answer. But then you're buying A350s now, and you're acquiring A350s, a fairly large number of those planes coming in. Prior to that, a couple of 787s as well. And of course, you are deploying 777s also. And so let me ask you that same question I asked you a couple of years ago. How do you see yourself competing as a brand known to be a low-cost carrier with, let us say, an Air India, which offers a full-cost service on long-haul routes?
Yeah. Well, let me start by saying I regret that my answer at that time was perceived as a neither here nor there answer when I said to you, IndiGo will become a global aviation giant by 2030. But we're a listed company after all, so when we speak about buying aircraft, we do that according to the rules which apply to that, and we make it public at the time it is appropriate, and then we make it public to everyone. And obviously, what we have been doing since our first interview, and thank you for making that point in reference. You know, I joined IndiGo in the summer of 22, and the country was emerging from COVID, and it was clear that India was on a continued track towards becoming the third largest economy in the world. Part of that is having an airline or even airlines which are representing that size and opportunity and potential of the country. And against that backdrop, the ambition for IndiGo to become a global aviation giant by 2030 was shaped and further formed. We have put 2 very significant steps on that. One was an additional order for 500 narrow bodies in 23, and the order for 350s, which we made in 24. And clearly, these 2 very important building blocks will help us to reach that goal. I think IndiGo cannot be labeled as a classical low-cost airline. We operate on a low-cost basis, and that's needed in order to be competitive in the market. We want to maintain our cost leadership. But for the flights we operate now, the 787s, which we have on damp lease until the 350 arrives, actually the announcements today and the open for sale from Mumbai to Manchester and Mumbai to Amsterdam will have a service, including in the economy class, with hot food for the duration of these longer flights, 8 to 9 hour flights. So IndiGo has taken already many steps, including the domestic business class, a loyalty program, partnerships, which help us in our building blocks of that journey towards becoming a global aviation giant. I hope this is a bit more clear than the neither here nor there answer that 3 years ago.
I'm going to push you. I'm going to push you now. How good is your business class going to be? Is it going to offer the premium service which we see leading international carriers offer, or is it going to be some sort of a hybrid model?
No, you have to walk before you can run, and I think IndiGo is entering this space. We have put a new benchmark, I would say, in the domestic space with IndiGo Stretch, where our customers have an extremely positive response to IndiGo Stretch. We started now with that very same product international into Bangkok, and we use the same product on our Amsterdam and Manchester routes, which will be actually the same way how IndiGo started domestically, very affordable fares for a premium service. So yes, these are not yet flat beds or some of the features some of the others are having, but the price will be done accordingly. And this will open up a whole new foray of customers and travelers who wanted to have more space, who wanted to travel in that part. It will have hot meals, which I think is an important element for that duration of the flights, and will change the landscape in that. And by the time it is 2030, we'll make the next step in terms of our evolution.
Oh, that's an interesting point. So to start with, you might have a version of the stretch seats, or possibly the stretch seats which you presently operate, but by 2030 you will reassess and possibly go in for full lie-flat beds in business class. Am I reading that right?
Well, we have the 350s coming in by 27. We have not yet disclosed what the exact configuration for the 350 will be. And until the 350s are there, we have the bridging solution with the 787s. That bridging solution is the 787s we take on Damplies from Norse, and having actually a very good seat, but not a flat seat, a very good seat. And for IndiGo to enter that space with 56 of these stretch seats, which are good business class seat, in-flight entertainment, hot meal, Indian curated meals, Indian curated liquor, and that actually will help us to start finding our place in that market. Whatever comes after that, I guess we will have a similar interview in 2 years from now, and I'll be able to share that with you.
All right. A few more questions. One of the big concerns, and I was tracking this personally a few months back, were these hoax bomb calls which were made. It affected the industry tremendously. And, I mean, fortunately, these were hoax calls at one level. I mean, that was the silver lining. But it must have been very tense for you and difficult for you to be getting woken up potentially in the middle of the night to be told that there is a situation which is developing. And, nobody at that stage initially really knew what it was all about. Could you run through how you dealt with this problem?
Yeah, it is, and let me be a bit outspoken on that. I think whoever was behind this was a very irresponsible action. Safety in aviation industry is of paramount importance. So as airlines, we have to take these calls very serious. And this was not specifically for IndiGo, this was for the entire Indian aviation. But being the market leader, obviously, we had a very significant number. And the numbers went up to high levels. But I think here, the collaboration with the Indian government and the collaboration with the entire ecosystem to address this issue has been very important. And again, as airlines, we have to take these calls and these elements extremely serious, and therefore I'm glad with the strong collaboration and cooperation we had within the aviation group, with the airlines, airports, and obviously the Indian government.
Are you satisfied with the progress which has been made in investigations to trying to figure out where this all came from, how this all happened? Who was responsible?
I think I would better leave that to the Indian government, and they're leading this type of investigation, and it's for them also to communicate on that, and not up to me.
Mr. Elbers, earlier on, and this was quite a few years back, you've had lots of problems with aircraft operating the Pratt engines, the Pratt & Whitney engines. Of course, since then, you've ordered hundreds of aircraft with new generation engines and a different engine manufacturer. But in terms of dealing with the number of aircraft with those Pratt engines which are still grounded, where does IndiGo now stand?
Yeah, it's important. It was an important topic for us last year. It is still an important topic, but if I may use that phrasing, we've turned the corner. And IndiGo was largely affected by these global aviation, supply chain shortages. It was also being affected by some of the powder metal issues which occurred on the engines of Pratt, and that led to a situation in the second quarter of last year with planes on the ground in the range of 80, which is a very significant number. IndiGo, I must say, and we're very proud of that, had been able to take a whole range of mitigating measures, and thanks to that we have been able to keep our capacity guidance and present the numbers. I mean, we presented a 7,200 crore profit of last year, which is a very good number. So we have been able to deal with that. Having said that, we turned the corner. The numbers have come down slowly but steadily. The end of third quarter, they were in the 60s. The end of the fourth quarter, they were in the 50s. And today, they're in the 40s. So we see a gradual reduction of that number of planes on the ground. And we continue to have a strong communication and collaboration with the suppliers to make sure that we continue that trajectory of planes getting back in the air or being returned to the leasing companies.
One or two more questions, Mr. Elbers. And this is something which doesn't necessarily impact just Indian travelers or airlines out of India. It is a worldwide problem. boisterous passengers, passengers who don't listen, passengers who may be inebriated, who aren't behaving well. And as an airline like IndiGo expands more and more, then that might become even more of a factor. Is this a concern for you, the conduct of passengers on board airlines, as India's aviation grows?
No, I think concern is probably a bit of a strong word. Is it a point of attention? Absolutely. And even in India, we have seen over the past 2-3 years a couple of occasions where things were not going the way they should go. I think I've mentioned in an earlier interview to our customers, please treat our crew the way you want to be treated. I think that's a very important thing. But importantly, we keep learning from these occasions and unfortunate events, and we incorporate it very strongly in the training of our frontline staff and very importantly our crew. So it's strongly embedded in our training. Our crews is very well trained and equipped to deal with situations like that, and with that, it is not a concern, but it's a point of continuous attention for us.
All right, and a final question to you. IndiGo is growing at a phenomenal rate. In the history of civil aviation, I'm not sure anybody has grown in quite the same way, certainly in terms of the induction of new aircraft, new routes, etc., etc. With that comes an entirely new generation of young pilots, of ground crew, of in-flight crew, and training has to be designed obviously around the premise of safety. That comes first, obviously. As you grow, how is safety and the training of young crew, whichever part of the airline they are in, possibly your number one focus?
Yeah. Well, thank you for addressing that also. That's obviously for every airline, and so it is for IndiGo, a key priority in that. And we're doing a lot of these trainings in-house actually. So we have a training center right from the start of IndiGo 18 years ago. That's where we do a lot of training. We collaborate deeply with other partners in the industry. Obviously with Airbus, we have a deep collaboration, being our sort of sole plane provider, and we continue to work closely with the government. Aviation safety is a process of continuous learning and continuous evolution and development. And, our size also gives us the opportunity to have a lot of those learnings in terms of, evaluating experiences, see how we can do better, see where we can learn from, share it with others, and take also information from others. So it's an important topic, obviously, and we continue to have it deeply embedded in all our training, all our procedures, and all the steps we're taking along the way.
Mr. Elbers, as always, wonderful speaking to you. Thank you so much for spending some time and really sort of charting out where IndiGo stands on several of the current issues. Your fundamentals are really something else. Your cash reserves are very strong, and all of the dangers or the threats or the immediate uncertainties, it's stuff that you can probably deal with. But it's exciting times for Indian aviation, and let's hope that this curve continues. Thank you very much for speaking to us.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening.